cat girl Lynette can tear down the competition. In the next 30 seconds, I'll tell you how. Lynette's a mid-investment 4-star Animo sub-DPS who's a burst-based utility unit. Her skill has both a press and hold, both of which cause her to lose and restore HP. How will that work? Her burst is the main utility of her kit, so level it up first. For more comfortable rotations, use this. Lynette enjoys playing on a Fav or Sack sword, otherwise she has requirements up to 200% plus. And carrying her Animo family name, she dons 4-piece VV the best. But is that actually practical? Hold it! We're not done yet! Lynette's best teams are Linny Monopyro, Wanderer 3nemo, and Aggravate. So does this mean you're officially a feline extraordinaire? Not quite yet, but this video will get you there. Well then, I'm Juice, and that was the Fresh Squeeze. Let's get into it. So on a side note, why are so many children of the beautiful Animo Archon cat related? You attract what you fear, I suppose. Lynette's rotations are pretty simple as a supportive animal unit. Her E duration is quite short on its own, the max duration of her ult only being 2.5 seconds with a 12-second cooldown. If we assume she's on a Favonius sword and getting around 5 swirls per team, then she'll function on a pretty simple basis of this. We'll cover her A4 in more detail with the talent section, but just know that you're always going to want to cast her burst with some kind of element applied upon the enemy first. However, we're always playing element impact anyway, so that shouldn't be an issue. Her C4 can allow Lynette to pull off an extra E cast before going into Q as well. Her normals can mostly be ignored unless your Lynette's at C6. Even then, that's not the main focus of her kit, so there's not much to be said. Her skill's more complex, however. It features both a press and hold, with there being a cooldown of 12 seconds in between. Her press just has her quickly shoot out an Enigma thrust, which produces high Animo damage upon an enemy. It generates 4 particles per use regardless of whether you use press or hold, and applies Oisted once every 10 seconds. If you hold, however, you go into speed mode, similar to how Yolande does it, making Lynette friendly for exploration since this doesn't consume stamina. It'll apply a shadow sign to a nearby opponent. Wow, that's edgy. And when the duration of her speed mode ends, that's when she'll unleash her Enigma thrust. But if a nearby enemy has shadow sign applied upon them, then Lynette will magically teleport over to them, and then use Enigma flash on them specifically. You can only have one enemy marked with shadow sign at a time, which makes it fairly single target oriented. And if the enemy strays too far away, then the shadow sign mark will just disappear among the sea of butterflies, an illusion of the past. Her hold is also pretty nice for repositioning, and another fun use is in the Abyss, if enemies spawn 10 million light years away from you. Just dash over to them quickly using Lynette's hold skill. The skill also has an interesting mechanic where she'll heal herself based on her max HP, but 4 seconds after using this ability, she'll also lose some of her HP. The regeneration is fixed at 25% regardless of talent level, and the loss rate is fixed at 6% regardless of talent level. And no, this doesn't encourage building any HP on Lynette since none of her abilities scale off it. Her burst is the most interesting portion of her kit since it serves as Lynette's main utility and will also deal the majority of her DPS when playing her in her regular roles. She'll deal some AoE Animo damage, and then will summon a huge cat in a hat which features some interesting abilities. It acts as a very strong taunt which will deal Animo damage to enemies that draw near it, and when it comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, it'll suck up that element and fire off shots called Vivid Shots, which deal elemental damage based on whatever it sucked up. These Vivid Shots make up 30% of Lynette's burst damage, and her burst also follows a unique infusion priority compared to the regular one. Instead of Pyro being on top, it's actually Cryo. Also, while 70% of her burst is AoE, the Vivid Shots that Lynette fired off are generally very single-target oriented. But taunt is pretty thick and won't get killed off easily, so her burst can also double down as crowd control and offer defensive utility based on the kinds of enemies you're facing. Then we move on to take a look at her Ascension passives. Her A1 will offer an attack buff based on how many different elements you have in the party. It's a nice little buff that she and her other party members can take advantage of, but note that this hurts her synergy with Linny, which I'm sure many of you are all interested in. Hold on until the team section for that. Her A4 is just some free DPS for her. When her burst absorbs an element, her burst will then deal 15% more damage. Pretty straightforward stuff. This applies to her Vivid Shots as well. In terms of priorities, leveling Lynette to 90 isn't a bad idea. You know how it goes, she's an Animo, and she can be placed in teams which utilize transformative reactions, so her swirls will scale off that. Now for talent priorities. First off, this is the general rule of thumb you'll follow. However, while her burst is generally the thickest portion of her kit, if you want to fit 2 skills in per rotation with her, then her skill and burst can be considered of equal value. That'd change the priority to look more like this then. Even so, I'd still recommend leveling her burst first since it's where the most of her usability lies. But if you want to play her as a C6 on-field driver unit, will all of her talents become worth leveling at this point with a slight bias towards her normals? Otherwise, you can pretty much just neglect her normals. And hey, if you're enjoying the content, why not consider liking and subscribing, maybe even leaving a cool comment down below. If you do, then Lynette will do a performance just for you. Just get a vacuum cleaner for afterwards, cat hair will be everywhere. Now, what of Lynette's ER costs? There's a few situations which encourage certain amounts of ER, as she has a burst cost of 70, courtesy to the Lynette Mains Discord who debunked these scenarios. If we assume Lynette's a solo animal in the team acting as a Viridescent Venerer support with 1 E per rotation and 12 extra non-animal particles from her teammates, alongside 5 clear particles or HP particles, she'd require around 260 to 280% ER. Whew. If we assume she's playing a similar role with 2 E's per rotation, with Electro Resonant in an Aggravate team, Visual included, with 5 clear or HP particles with a Fav user in the team, that's significantly reduced down to 130 to 140% ER. If she's C6 and you're playing Lynette on field, with C6 Farazan accompanying her, featuring 2 E's per rotation, Visual, Fav, and the 5 clear or HP particles included, that's 125 to 140% ER. In a mono Animo team with C6 Farazan, Wanderer, a Fav user, and 5 clear or HP particles, that's 170 to 180% ER for you. Here's a quick table to summarize these scenarios. If you want a more general, non-specific ballpark, typically playing her of around 200 plus ER is the way to go, but this can be significantly lowered or heightened depending on rotation and the quality of your teammate's particle generation. Now, what props does the assistant magician need to perform at her peak? Well, for starters, here's a table of numbers courtesy of the Lynette Mains Discord on her highest damaging sets, but it's worth noting that while 4-piece VV might not be the best in slot set per se, how are you actually playing her? If you're playing her as an off-field Animo support, should you really care about other options? Let's delve into things. 4-piece Viridescent Venerer is pretty much the go-to choice for all Animo support units. Even though she doesn't pull up that many swirls, she still generally prefers 4VD over other options even if you're optimizing for her personal DPS. The 40% Res Shred is too much to pass up on due to how much personal DPS it provides your other teammates and how much it does for your team overall. Plus, it's not all for naught with Lynette anyway, since a 2-piece still gives 15% Animo damage bonus. However, if your team doesn't really benefit from 4VV somehow, or you already have a holder in the team, then 4-piece Emblem is her next best bet. There's no excuses anymore now that the bane of all evil is in the strongbox. This set capitalizes well on how much ER Lynette needs, and can help her meet set requirements more comfortably. 4-piece Golden Troop Solid. It's similar to Strength against 4-piece Emblem, and is a tiny bit better than VV when played in teams that don't care for VV. It's only competitive if you can slot in 2 skills per rotation, however. 4-piece Mayonnaise Hunter synergizes nicely with C6 on-field Lynette, boding well with her HP gain and HP loss mechanics, the buff lasting the full duration of Lynette's 6-second infusion duration. 4-piece Thundering Furies strikes once again, first as a clown set on Kazuha, and now on Lynette as an option in dual Animo comps, with an Electro and Dendro unit, so pretty much only usable in Aggravate and Spread. This set also works nicely with on-field C6 driver Lynette as well. This isn't going to be your most hugely efficient option, but it's something fun to mess around with. 2-piece mix and match sets can combine pretty much anything that has a positive effect on Lynette. 2-piece Glad with 2-piece Viridescent, and the like. This can also be used if you already have another Animo in your team, or if you're running a mono Animo comp. This is pretty much only a 1% increase over a 4-piece VV in set teams, but if you have far better subs on your mix and match sets, then use those for the time being. In terms of main stats, Lynette doesn't really trigger a ton of swirls as an Animo unit until her C6, which even then you'll only be popping off in swirls if you use her on field. So, her personal DPS actually shines best on a traditional ADC build. In terms of substats, you'll want to go for ER until you've met requirements, then crit, then attack, and percent, and then finally EM. In terms of crit min-maxing for all the true cat girl simps out there, of course aim for a 1-to-2 ratio, but to be more specific, since you'll probably play her on an ER weapon which we'll discuss later, you can start by aiming for 60 to 120, this is fairly standard for a unit on a non-crit weapon. Then you could consider aiming for 70 to 140, which is of course much nicer, and then finally 70 plus to 150. This also just applies to any support who likes crit but doesn't typically use a crit weapon, by the way. Also, EM subs are still appreciated on Lynette, just don't make it the main focus of her build since her DPS scales off attack. I think cat girls don't really need weapons. They can just scratch someone's skin and they'll be dead for days, but if Lynette insists, I suppose. Here's a quick table with numbers courtesy of the Lynette Main's Discord. However, once again, even if her highest damaging options may be at the top of the list, does that actually make them the most viable Lynette options? Let's delve into it. Favonius Sword. You totally have never heard anyone recommend this for an off-field support before, not even once. This magical weapon that absolutely nobody knows for sure is unsurprisingly great on Lynette, since it provides plenty of ER to Lynette, which makes her much friendlier to build, and the white particles produced are nice for the rest of your team. One of Lynette's best choices if you need the energy and want smooth gameplay. Sacrificial Sword is another option you 100% haven't heard of before. Promise, no scam. It's another powerful Lynette choice if you're willing to weave 2 skills into your rotation, but this will obviously increase the length of your rotations as a result. If you're playing mono animo, this could potentially provide you more ER to her over Favonius. Floyd Sandra Ferryman is a permanently free choice which can act as a free-to-play alternative to Favonius if you don't have one yet. Somehow. It does provide a tiny bit more DPS over Favonius, but you lose the clear particles which come with it. Cats like fish, so you have to go fishing for this weapon. Finale of the Deeps, a brand new craftable which synergizes excellently with Lynette's kit and offers plenty of attack which you can easily maintain uptimes on. The main issue is it'll absorb the HP Lynette would also use to heal herself with, causing her HP loss to be akin to Cookie. Healers then become more important with this weapon. This also harms Lynette's ability to build stacks on 4-piece Mayonnaise Hunter, but at R5 with 4-piece Viridescent Venerer on, this weapon can even contest against Mistsplitter on a C6 R1 Mistsplitter Lynette. Wolffang is a new Battle Pass weapon. Yippee, they finally added a new one! It's similar in performance to Finale of the Deep, but in high ER scenarios, it loses out to Finale, Fav, and Sack. If you run a ton of attack buffs, then this weapon outdoes Finale. The Black Sword's only worth considering if playing Lynette as a C6 on-field driver. Pretty nice with 4-piece Mayonnaise instrument, since the weapon passive can help build and maintain set stacks. Amenoma's not really a great choice for Lynette. She can't build stacks off of it that easily, but if you have one lying around at R5 after Ayaka got herself a shiny new Mistsplitter or another weapon, then sure, this can be a slightly worse option than Fav in practice. Mistsplitter, dear beloved Mistsplitter, a nice weapon for C6 on-field Lynette, but damage percent isn't that valuable on Lynette in particular since she already gets damage percent out of her Ascensions and C6 passive. It's a powerful crit stat stick, granted you can meet ER requirements with it. Jade Cutter's another delicious weapon option. It's a little better than Mistsplitter since you can utilize the attack percent and its passive a little more, and the crit rate is appreciated. Its robustness off for raw damage is 6. If you're playing her in 4-piece Mayonnaise, you're going to get a boatload of crit rate. Think about how Ayaka tends to stray away from crit rate weapons due to how much crit rate Blizzard Strayer and innate parts of her kit provide. So if you roll too many crit rate subs, then you might find Mistsplitter to be more useful. Foliar Incision's got a ton of crit damage on it, but Lynette suffers with the passive since she gets plenty of damage out of her skill and burst while not wanting to be run on EM. It falls behind R5 Finale unless you're running Lynette with Bennett. Fine if you want to use it on her already, but don't get it specifically for her. Everyone loves cats. Sorry, I mean most people love cats. So who exactly would like this Discord kitten on their team? First off, Lynette does have some value in Linny teams. There's some pros and cons here. Beginning with the bad, since Linny naturally has so many outside sources of attack flowing in, Lynette's attack providing buff isn't really huge compared to what other supports can offer. Her crowd control overall can be quite weak, even with her C1, which offers some extra pull with her hold skill. But Lynette's taunt is appreciated by Linny, who also constantly fires off taunts to distract enemies. This can make playing Linny, Bennett, Xiangling, and Lynette together quite intuitive, since Lynette sets up a solid distraction for enemies, while also getting buffed by Bennett and firing out pyro-infused vivid shots. Plus, since Linny's mostly a single target oriented unit, Lynette too is also rather single target with a tiny bit of AoE with her burst, making her a good choice against boss scenarios where you'd employ Linny to get the kill. Her A4 buff also affects Xiangling positively. She gains Pyro Res herself and deals solid sub DPS in this team. She isn't the BIS animal here, that would be Kazuha, but yes, you can indeed make the siblings dual work here if you so choose. If you want to learn more about Linny, why not check out the guide I have on him on my channel? She's also effective in Freenamo. Playing her with fellow feline creature Scar and Meow, Farazan and Bennett can result in Lynette dealing considerable personal DPS thanks to getting buffed by both Bennett and Farazan. Once again, she'll fire off Pyro Vivid shots, and her ER cost will be lowered nicely here. Just note that Farazan's quite the solar panel herself here in terms of energy. Some Animal Res too, which is nice, and since Wanderer also excels in single target, Lynette is once again a good choice for boss scenarios. Once again, she's not exactly the BIS choice here, but she definitely brings some value to the table and doesn't just sit around to look pretty. Then finally, where you'll probably be playing Lynette the most. These teams generate nice energy particles and have longer rotations, which allow Lynette to build more into damage over ER, since she's more easily able to slot in 2 skills per rotation. Plus, this is also the team where you'll be employing C6 driver Lynette if you choose to play her like that at all. You have quite a few options in terms of teammates here. Electro units you can use include Fischl, Keqing, Yaimiko, Kukishinobu. Fischl's a pretty good unit if you're playing driver Lynette here. For Dendro units, Nihira, Yao Yao, Dendro Traveler, Kale, Kirara, Baiju, Kave, the handsome Alhaitham, and Tignori are all viable choices here. Pretty much any off-field Dendro unit will do for either her on or off-field playstyles. On-field Dendro units are good too, they just don't really benefit from Lynette that much. Then for your flex slot, either another Electro or Dendro unit, or Kazuha, Zhongli, Waifu, Sucrose, Sayu, Jeans, Heizo, and Farizan all work fine. Select whoever fulfills your needs the most depending on the situation and content faced. As for Lynette team building on the whole, she's honestly fine anywhere a VV Shredder is appreciated. She's mostly good to slot into other teams if you're already using or simply don't have Kazuha, or if you're already using or don't have Sucrose, or if you're not playing her because her kit's something not alright in terms of heal, or if you need Oysa damage. Otherwise, Lynette isn't exactly BIS in any teams or these two, but she can definitely work if you need her to. Lynette's going to be given out for free, so let's see if her cons are worth a dime at all. Like I said earlier, just provide some grouping with her elemental skill. It's not highly effective grouping if we're comparing it to the likes of Sucrose's or Kazuha's grouping, but it can help keep enemies in one space more easily for taunt assistance. Pretty much double the damage. It'll also increase the elemental application that her vivid shots provide, which can result in extra swirls or reactions being procced. Her burst being upgraded is pretty nice since it's the thickest portion of her kit's DPS, generally speaking. Nice extra boost. An extra skill charge, which is useful for teams which can't weave in 2 skills per rotation due to her cooldown timings, so you can front load her skill twice to reap out more energy. But if a team can get 2 skills in per rotation already, this is pretty much only good for repositioning and energy funneling. This is also nice to have in the overworld. Talent upgrade, shocker, who would have guessed? However, with what her C4 provides, the DPS her skill provides isn't actually all that shabby, so this upgrade is nicely appreciated. This ability provides Lynette with a tidy 20% extra animo damage bonus after using her skill, which is quite nice. But not just that, as I mentioned various times throughout this video, you also gain an animo infusion with all her attacks. Both of these things last for 6 seconds, so now you're able to play her as a driver or main DPS now. Nice! Plus, if you play with units such as C6 Bennett, Chongyun, and Candace, you can actually get some swirls off Lynette's weapon and their infusions, which opens up opportunities for some fun swirling setups. Think about how Sucrose can perform the Globa Swirl, for example. In terms of vertical investment, she's a 4-star support unit, so I'd say stopping at C2 with an R5 Fav or Sac Sword is fine, but if you insist on playing her as the main DPS, her route's pretty straightforward. Get her to C6, get C6 Farazan, and then get her a J-Cut or a Mistsplitter according to your artifact rolls. Lynette's an assistant to the wonders of magic, so it's no wonder that she's a jack of many trades. She doesn't particularly excel at any one of them, and I wouldn't call her the definitive best-in-slot option of any team, but she's far from bad and can absolutely get the job done. All AR25 plus players will receive a copy of Lynette for free, and not only this, but her status of free in the game is permanent. So in any case, give her a try yourself and see how you feel about her. Hopefully this guide was able to groom your cat girl to be perfectly battle ready. This has been Juice, signing out, and I wish you all a day as fuzzy as Lynette's tail.